So my talk today is Avoiding Commerce Extinction, Lessons from some Retail Dinosaurs. So my name is Joshua Warren. I'm the CEO of Creativity. I've been working in e-commerce for 20 years now, and I'm a Magento certified solution specialist and developer. I have been known to tweet occasionally. I love these signs that say don't forget to tweet, so please don't forget to tweet. And definitely, if you have questions that you don't get a chance to ask today, or if you think of something later when you're back home, back at work, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. That's really the best way to reach me. And today in this session, I really want it to be about lessons for all merchants, for all sizes of merchants, not just large retailers or smaller merchants. And I really built this out thinking of three specific example merchants in my mind. And those three I break down into a smaller pure play online retailer, a mid-sized fast-growing retailer that maybe has a few stores, and then a very large established retailer with over 100 stores. So no matter what size business you have, or if you're working with merchants, no matter what size merchant you're working with, there's going to be lessons today that will apply to you. So avoiding commerce extinction, what does that mean and what are we going to talk about? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to meet these retail dinosaurs that we're talking about. We're going to see how to dodge the asteroids that led to their extinction, and then we're going to leave with some actionable items for y'all to implement in the next 12 months. So meeting the dinosaurs, thought that was a great visualization of dinosaurs in New York. Our dinosaurs today aren't nearly that big or cool though. We're going to talk about some retailers. And there's 7 different retailers that I did a really deep dive on. And they break out into 2 groups. The first group, these 3 have all declared bankruptcy, but either survived the reorganization process or in the process of surviving that. And that's Payless Shoes, Toys R Us, and Gymboree. Payless actually just very recently announced that they were completing that process of reorganization, but they're still not doing great, definitely not as good as they used to be. And then there's 4 dinosaurs that didn't make it, and that's Radio Shack, The Limited, Alfred Angelo, and HHGreg. And so there's a lot of information to cover, and I don't want to focus too much on specifics of all 7 of these. We'd be here for hours. So if you have questions about any of these specific retailers and kind of the lessons I learned from them, I'm going to have a link later where you can read more, or we can talk about that after the session. But know that these are the 7 that I've really studied and that I'm pulling out these lessons from. So what caused their extinction? We know that the dinosaurs were destroyed by an asteroid. That's what led to their extinction. So what caused the problems with these retail dinosaurs? And it's funny, you know, you read a lot, you see a lot of news articles, and the first thing you think is millennials. This guy killed the retail dinosaurs. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm getting so tired of the articles of, you know, millennials are killing retailers. Millennials are killing Applebee's. Millennials are killing this, killing that. Despite what you have heard, millennials did not kill the retail store. They're not the problem here. There was actually 3 main issues that I found among all 7 of those retailers that kind of led to their extinction and led to their problems. And so those are the 3 things we're going to focus on. The very first one was these dinosaurs were slowed by poor technology. All 7 of these, and many, many more retailers that have gone bankrupt, they complained about their technology. They said they had slow technology, old technology. They couldn't make really fast business decisions or business changes. I don't know if y'all saw TJ's talk this morning, but he talked about how technical debt will slow your business down. He showed basically an old school ball and chain, and that really is what slowed these dinosaurs down. So one of the biggest impacts that had is all 7 of these had a very slow process when they wanted to add a new product to their product assortment. Everything from the budgetary approvals, getting the product made, the product data, getting the product online was slow. It was just lots of red tape, lots of poor processes. It was just a very slow process. Also, a majority of these dinosaurs that I reviewed, they saw a change coming. They realized they needed a better in-store experience. They needed to deploy some omni-channel technology. But in every case, they said, well, we can't do that because we have an old ERP or we have an old POS. We have this old system that we're stuck with that is preventing us from moving forward. And that's kind of scary when you look at some of these stats. 39% of Generation Z consumers want a walk-out experience in retail stores in the next 12 months. That means you walk into the store, You pick up your bottle of water, you walk out. You never stop at a cash register, you're charged automatically. That's the Amazon Go store experience. And that stat right there should really have some people scared, because I don't even think 24 or 36 months is enough time for most retailers to get that experience up and running. 50% of millennials are now saying that they will go to a retail store just to pick up an item they ordered online, that is their main reason to go to the store. And then 55% of consumers are actually ready to engage with chatbots and virtual assistants for completing purchases. So responding to those new expectations really requires a well-integrated technology stack. If you're running on an old, homegrown e-commerce platform, an ancient, based in COBOL ERP, something like that, you're not deploying a chatbot anytime soon. It's just not possible. And that's one of the things that really killed a lot of these retailers. The thought of integrating some sort of new system, especially some experience that doesn't even exist yet, shouldn't scare you because of your technology. It should be something that you view as an exciting challenge. If you view it as a sort of scary new thing to implement because of your existing systems, that's a really good sign that you're going down a bad path that a lot of these retailers went down. And if that is the situation you're in now, retool your technology stack now, update your tech now. Don't wait until you're already halfway out of business. Don't wait till you start losing that market share. That was one of the big problems with Toys R Us is they have over $4 billion in debt now, in part because they decided to undertake all these huge technology projects kind of at the last second after it was already kind of too late and their revenues were dropping. And there's really no excuse for poor technology, simply because Magento Commerce, Akeneo, which is a PIM, and Morello, which is an ERP, all of these tools exist in both an open source and enterprise edition, so merchants of any size can be deploying these platforms that are really on the cutting edge of commerce. So there's no excuse to not have a really strong technology stack. And again, I know like the last thing I ever want to see a merchant do is replace their ERP. I don't know how many failed ERP projects I've seen. They are incredibly painful. But the alternative in a lot of cases, if you're dealing with an ERP that's holding you back, the alternative is going out of business. So at some point, you have to bite that bullet. You have to move that technology forward. So the second asteroid that took out a lot of the dinosaurs was that they didn't fully commit to change. Many of these dinosaurs, those 7 companies I was talking about, they saw the end coming, and they made an effort to react. Probably the funniest / saddest was Radio Shack. So they're losing market share, they're going out of business, they're trying to decide what do we do, how do we get, no one's buying radios anymore, no one's buying CB radios, which is what they had kind of based their brand image on. How do we rebrand? And they said, let's call our store The Shack, because everyone wants to go to a retail store called The Shack. It just sounds fun. I mean, I don't really know where that idea came from, but that was their big last-ditch effort, and of course, because it was kind of a silly idea, it didn't get a lot of internal buy-in. And so they didn't fully commit to that change, and so you saw a lot of cases where employees were still calling it Radio Shack, they hadn't embraced calling it The Shack, and it was just a very mixed message that did more harm than good. The Limited, which was a fashion retailer, decided kind of halfway through their demise, they would completely and totally change their target customer. And you could see in the company that marketing maybe got on board with that, but purchasing and merchandising didn't. And so you kind of have marketing messages targeted to one type of customer, but the actual products were designed for another type of customer because that change wasn't embraced organizationally, throughout the whole company. And then Alfred Angelo, sadly, right as they went out of business, kind of realized that their whole process of asking for brides to put a big deposit down up front just didn't meet with what the modern bride wanted. The entire ordering process was kind of broken. So they decided to start retooling that, and that was right as they started to collapse. And in each of these cases, this change was implemented very half-heartedly, and there wasn't full buy-in throughout the company. It was just something that they kind of started doing, but didn't really go all in on. Most of these were never completed. They were either killed off or the company went out of business before the change could be completed. And most of them didn't have a true champion within the company. The only kind of midway through their extinction change I could find was that had a strong champion was at HHGreg. They had a executive that was really passionate about expanding throughout the US, and sadly, before he could finish that plan, he actually passed away. And so even in that case, they kind of lost their champion behind that change. And so that's just how critical it is that you have someone on your team championing the changes that you're making as a merchant. And you really do have to embrace change. We're going to see in kind of the third and biggest asteroid that's taking out merchants left and right involves change. And if you don't have a company culture that values meaningful changes, then you're going to have problems. And so there's two sides of that coin. There's companies that make changes left and right, but they're all superficial changes. They want to say, we're an agile organization, we're responding to the market. But when you look at the changes they're making, they're all superficial changes that aren't really impacting their business. The other side, you have the companies that we have always sold this way, we will always continue to sell this way, we're not changing. I actually had a retailer tell me that, well, I'm a dinosaur and I sell to other dinosaurs who sell to other dinosaurs. And that's actually where the idea for this talk title came from, because luckily, I'm a little sarcastic, but our team kind of nudged me under the table, because as soon as I heard that merchant say that, I thought, dinosaurs go extinct. That's probably not the best thing to do. You don't want to compare yourself to a dinosaur. So there are definitely retailers out there and merchants out there that have this attitude of, we don't change, it's worked for us in the past, so we're not going to change. And those are the ones that you're going to see going bankrupt next as retail really changes over the next few years. And again, changes for change's sake aren't going to save a doomed business. If the merchant's financials are bad, if their market has just shifted so much that they're so off from their target audience, no amount of change, especially change for change's sake, will save them. And so with that, consider major changes really well. Have a strong process where you vet these changes, you think them through, you don't just kind of react, but you do come to a decision, make that change, and fully focus the company on seeing it through and completing it. Because again, so many of these companies would half-heartedly start changing something and never finish it and go out of business. Biggest asteroid, the biggest thing that is just literally destroying retailers and merchants is not meeting consumers on their terms. And some of these, as I read through them and kind of built these case studies, it was almost comical, some of the things that some of these businesses stuck with. Payless Shoes, theirs is probably the least bad. Their big problem is they've kind of realized that modern consumers want to be able to buy online and pick up in store, so they started an omni-channel project. The problem with that is if you actually try it, it displays an error message a majority of the time. I've tried different days, different zip codes, different locations, different shoes, and you pull up the list of stores that you can pick this shoe up in, and it just says, we're sorry, inventory data is not available at this time, next to every single store. When you can get it to work, usually it takes 7 business days for them to fulfill that order and make it available in the store. So that's not a really engaging consumer experience. Radio Shack, they had kind of built their business around the thought that everyone's always going to buy a new smartphone every year, and they're going to buy it from an electronics store. No one would ever go to a mall kiosk, no one would ever go to like an Apple store, and no one would ever buy direct from their cellular carrier. And obviously that changed pretty substantially, and that's a change that they never really recovered from. Alfred Angelo kind of assumed that brides will always be willing to pay a large deposit and wait many weeks for their wedding dress to be made. I think they thought that the wedding business and the bridal business would be immune from the fast fashion trend, and they were very, very wrong, and that put them out of business. And then Toys R Us, they have apparently for a long time said parents will always want to bring their kids to the toy store so they can beg and yell and scream for that toy they want. Why would they ever want to buy toys online? And this year alone, 41% of toys are being purchased online. HHGreg, they really built their business around TVs, and they built their business around the old, heavy, bulky CRT screens. They kind of had this attitude of, these TVs take special equipment to transport, special equipment to install. It's not something you can just have shipped to you. So they built their entire business around that specialized delivery of that certain type of TV. And when flat panels came out, it just killed them. They could never really compensate for that. And then Gymboree, they had the idea that they had such a great in-store experience that families will always drive further to go to a mall with a Gymboree store than one without. And that's just, consumers are expecting things to be within their day-to-day life, within their commute and things like that. They're no longer driving out to that specific mall. And all of this, as I read through this, I thought of the Steve Jobs quote, which is, "Get closer than ever to your customers, so close you tell them what they need well before they realize it themselves." But I think the most important thing to take away from that is don't just do that with your product assortment. Don't just do that with the features of your products or how you sell your products. Take that attitude with the entire experience of someone shopping and buying from you. So think about the omni-channel experience your customers want, the purchasing experience, all those elements, and not just the products. So expect change. Constantly reevaluate your understanding of your customers' needs and desires. So constantly, once you get into your customer's head, you know what they want, you know how they want to buy it, constantly question that. Because again, Radio Shack thought they had it dialed in. They thought they knew exactly how people were going to buy smartphones forever, and they didn't stop and reevaluate that. And if they had, they might have realized, hey, this isn't where the market's going, we need to adapt. If you do have stores, or if you're working with merchants that have stores, fewer and fewer people want to interact with salespeople. 44% of millennials say they go to a store to interact with a salesperson, and the really shocking statistic is Generation Z, 7% of them will interact with a salesperson. So there's actually more people in Generation Z that want that walk-out buying experience than want to talk to a salesperson. So you have to, that's a huge shift in how stores are run. That basically means you have to have an omni-channel experience. You have to have technology in your stores. And then another big shift that's really simple when you think about it, but that so many merchants aren't taking into account, is customers aren't going to drive out of their way for your store anymore. Used to, if you had a destination store, people would drive pretty far to go to it. They don't anymore. Malls are closing left and right because of this fact, because people, they want to go to lifestyle centers. They want to go to shopping centers in their area. They want to go places where they're also exercising or they're also going to dinner, that have kind of a complete experience. They don't want to drive out to the big mall. We actually have a mall in Dallas, where I'm from, that was mortgaged for $60 million, was appraised for $30 million, and sold for $15 million. Because no one goes to the mall anymore. So that's a huge shift, and that's something that no matter if you're a store retailer or an online-only retailer, you have to be thinking about that, and you have to see, how can I take advantage of this, or how can I react to this in my business? Basically, consumers want the product they want, delivered the way they want, at the best possible price. And it's interesting, I remember a few years ago, there was this kind of common mentality that, millennials, they really want a high-quality, valuable product. They're not as price-driven. That's total bull. All the surveys now show that millennials, just like every other generation, they want a good deal. They want to know they're getting the best price. So you really have to focus on getting them the best price and getting the product to them in a way that's convenient for them. And a few examples, a few things to think about with that is same-day delivery services, store pickup, delivery lockers. Find any way to allow consumers to pick up their orders in a way that fits their lifestyle. UPS, USPS, the different delivery services, that used to be kind of, you'd maybe offer one, and if you offered two different options, that would be nice. Now, a lot of consumers aren't even looking at those. They're asking, okay, can you deliver this to me same day? Or can you deliver it to a locker that I can pick up on my way home from work? There's even some experiments going on where delivery services will be able to deliver things to the trunk of your car while you're at work, so that you literally don't deviate at all from your day-to-day life to get your products. So based on this, smaller retailers, find ways the larger retailers in your vertical aren't keeping up with consumer desires, provide a better experience. The smaller retailers are more agile. I don't usually hear from a smaller retailer, oh, we can't do that because we have an old ERP we can't replace. So that's definitely the strategic advantage here to embrace all this consumer change is react faster than the larger retailers are. If you're an e-com only merchant, then find ways that you can fight against those stores that no one's going to anymore. Think about how can you get your products into the consumer's hands faster than the stores are. In the larger retailers, you have more resources and more expertise within your company, so you can deploy better technology and the experience that consumers want but can't find at smaller retailers. The larger retailers, definitely VR, and I think more than VR, AR, augmented reality. That's something that, at least for now, until we see how far Apple takes ARKit, that's something that it's really going to take a larger retailer to implement. So that's an area you could really get out ahead in. Also, always question if you have a true understanding of what consumers want. Again, all 7 of the dinosaurs thought they knew exactly what their customers wanted, and 4 of them are now out of business, and 3 of them are pretty close. So keep questioning, keep saying, okay, do I really understand what consumers want? Has it changed? If you're in a situation where you're like, customer behavior and customer desires in my industry or in my vertical haven't changed much in the past 2 years. Chances are they have, and you've just missed those changes. And that's where it's really important to talk to your customers and just flat out ask them, are you meeting their expectations? And this goes way beyond surveys on the cash register receipt. This goes into conversations with customers, finding out, what do you do during the day? What did you do before you came to the store? What are you doing after you leave the store? Why are you buying from us and not from these alternatives? And understand what is it that's driving that behavior. And again, every single one of these dinosaurs that went bankrupt failed to meet consumers on their terms or failed to react fast enough to changing consumer demands. And of all 3 of these asteroids we're trying to dodge, this is the one that I feel like is probably the most dangerous for every merchant that's here, is if you don't understand this consumer behavior and this shift in consumer behavior and the fact that it's changing now faster than it ever did before, then you could very well end up like one of those dinosaurs. So, again, 3 things, 3 asteroids to dodge. 3 things you absolutely have to make sure that you're doing right is have the technology to move fast, make sure you have a solid platform, fully commit to the changes you make, and meet consumers on their terms, not your terms. And these are the 3 biggest things that will keep you going and avoid the fate. And avoid the fate of these retail dinosaurs. So I'm going to have slides as well as some in-depth case studies on these 7 up on our website at creativity.com/extinct. Hopefully that's an easy URL to remember. So creativity.com/extinct. And I think we have a little bit of time for questions, but in case we don't, or if you think of some questions later, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, or there's that URL again where I'll have the slides and some more case studies and other materials. So, do we have any questions? Yeah. And so the question was basically about reordering and about customers that want that quick reordering experience or things like the walkout experience. And one interesting thing, I see Amazon trying a million different things around that. That's obviously something they're really working on. And their dash buttons, I think, are really interesting, especially if you sell a product like a household item that people are going to be reordering regularly. Those dash buttons are actually available in a sort of white labeled version called an IoT button. And I've seen some people integrate those with their stores where the consumer just pushes a button in their house and it generates an order in Magento. And I think that things like that, that's also where the voice assistants are big. I saw that earlier this week, Target announced that they're going to be supported by the Google Assistant so that you can actually order Target products from the Google Assistant. And that way you're not having to kind of stop your day. You can just ask Google to order something for you. So I think things like that, more than necessarily getting your phone out and entering an order. Like, I think anything that reduces friction where the consumer isn't having to think about it and it isn't having to stop and do something separate is where we're going to be. And again, yeah, the walkout experience in the next 12 months, I don't think any of this technology is going to be there in 12 months. I think that's very aspirational, but within a few years, I think we'll be to that point. And then I think we had one more question down here.
Yeah, have you looked at mom and pops, like one-off stores. And the data suggests that this phenomena, the dinosaurs, they're not going extinct. They're actually holding their own pretty well, but they are not embracing online technology much at all, except from an e-commerce standpoint. But they use it for events and social things and that kind of thing. You have any comment on the differences between the very small retailers and the small?
Yeah, so the question was basically the very small retailers and how there's a lot of very small retailers that aren't necessarily embracing a lot of this technology but aren't going out of business, and the differences between them and the larger ones. And being in New York and not too far from Wall Street, I didn't want to drum on this too much, but one thing I did notice is that a majority of these dinosaurs took private equity investment, took a lot of private equity investment, and that was definitely, I think, a factor in some of the problems. So I think the smallest companies that have been around a long time but aren't updating their technology but are still doing well, they have cash. They're sitting on cash. They can move faster. I know that Toys R Us, their bankruptcy, there's $4 billion in debt. One of the other ones was at $1 billion. When you have that much debt and debt service that you're having to deal with, you think very differently. And also just the ownership angle of that is when it's your family's business that's been in the family for 3 generations, you definitely make decisions differently than when it's one of your portfolio of companies that you have kind of an exit date in mind for. So I think that honestly, that's probably the biggest difference. Second to that is they will generally be closer to their customers. They'll understand more like the decision makers and the day-to-day consumer behavior and reactions. There's less of an org chart between those two, and I think that helps a lot. So, all right. Well, that is about all the time we have, I believe. One last question.
So I want to know, all of these reasons that you mentioned, they can be somehow handled if you follow the data, right? What data So is it that these people do not have the data, or they don't want to follow the data, or they have the wrong data? What is going on there?
Yeah, so why aren't they following the data? Why aren't they seeing the data that would save them from all this? And that's a good question. I think some of them, especially the bigger companies, they have these processes set up where this is the way they've always done it, this is the way they're always going to do it, and there's not a way for someone to say, hey, stop, we're still following our processes, but we're following them right into bankruptcy. I think that's definitely a problem. And then there's a lot of them that just, they're so busy with the day-to-day, and they're so focused on let's execute what we're doing today really well, they're not thinking about tomorrow, and they're not looking at that data. And that's where the retailers that do really well in the next few years are the ones that are looking ahead and that are kind of focusing on that. So I want to make sure the next speaker has all their time, so thank you all, and if you have any other questions, I'll be out in the hallway.